welcome everyone as you come into the room, and welcome you guys that are with us on the call in feature. We're happy to have you with us. And I just, I, every time I read a new chapter, and I know you guys are going to say, yeah, me too. Every time I read a new chapter, it's like, oh, wow, how does he, the way he articulates this content is just so revealing to me. And as he says the words, it just opens up an understanding, and it's so rich and full. And I just look forward to hearing your favorite parts and your take on chapter 15, Kimberly, and welcome to the book study club. It's been a while, and I know that you've been with us, but it's been a while since you've been on the show. And thank you
Mhm.
for being with us.
Oh, it's absolutely my pleasure. Thank you so much, Bill, for having the book club. As I was reviewing and preparing for our time together today, I just kept getting waves and waves of gratitude for you and for your consistency and also the wisdom that you had to let this ex, extend over many weeks because I might have used this analogy before, but um, when you order like a dessert, like a brownie sundae, you get like this huge bowl of brownies, a huge brownie, huge ice cream, and it's huge and it's awesome. And if you order like creme brulee or flan, it comes in this little container and then you just sip it and you just take a little bit at a time and you really taste it. And Rupert's words, whether he's, speaking them or writing them, are like the flan or the creme brulee. You can't inhale large amounts of it like you would a brownie sundae. You you have to slow down and just take a little at a time and taste it and savor it and let it find its place in you, and that's how you can assimilate or digest what Rupert talks about. So it's so nice that
Mm.
that you created a um, experience that enables all of us to spend lots of time in digestion as opposed to consumption.
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
think because they're both important,
yeah,
but when it comes to Rupert, the digestion part is where I get all of my that's where I get the nourishment from it. It
hmm,
it settles in and suddenly I look up and I am seeing differently, or I that shift in my perspective of um, what I know myself to be, that shift occurs as I digest and I just sit with it. So I just thanks for the wisdom of letting this take time because it needs that,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
We need the time.
Well, thankfully, I have to say that Kimberly and I were just talking before we started the show, and most of you guys know that we both teach a Course in Miracles, and we were we were talking about, well, how much of a Course in Miracles is it all right to bring in the room? And I said that I had a complaint about bringing too much of it in to this venue, and I'm honoring that. It wasn't. I mean, I didn't take it as a complaint. I just really took it as the voice of wisdom saying, to this is a Rupert Spira book club, and in his book, and so I want to honor that. And at the same time, I'm a presenter and a teacher, and Kimberly's a teacher of A Course in Miracles. So we want to honor that also. And I was saying to Kimberly before we started that Rupert's work, his content, is opening my awareness, it's opening my mind to understand more fully what I was reading in the course. It's just opened me up to understand that content in a much fuller, richer way. And this is why I feel that you bring a question to Rupert in one of his uh, retreats, or he doesn't call it a retreat, workshops, or no, he
Mm-hmm.
does call it a retreat. Um, he can answer a question from his point of view, from his understanding, that's the same truth of whatever you're bringing to him, something that's from Advaita, something that's from one of the other sages, Yogananda's teaching, or anywhere else. And because the truth is true.
Mm-hmm.
And when you were just saying a minute, creme brulee, and it sounds delicious, but that comes from the space of presence. That wisdom is a wisdom that consciousness holds, and we learn to enter into it and to abide there. And from there, the ancient wisdom is informing us in making really good decisions that work out. And I just love that what you were saying was telling, and I was going, okay, well, my talk in San Francisco next week is going to be about listening from the at in the center of the eye of the hurricane. The center of the storm is always still. It's like there's not even any breeze inside of there. And while you're in the center, and I'm going to equate it to the analogy is going to be in Christ vision or in awareness. You're in the center of the infinite self, the eternal self, when you're in that quiet place of awareness. And at the same time, the hurricane or the storms or the activities or the minor things of life are happening. And when you're in the center of that space, you're being informed out here in the finite self called Bill or Kimberly or Jenny or Annika. We're being informed now. We're not reacting out here thinking this is what we are, because we are knowing the self as awareness, and we're able to be in both places actually at the same time and not give our attention to this finite experience, because the infinite self is now running the show, is now like informing the experience of the finite self. And that's what this work is all about. That's what this to me, that's where the truth is leading us beyond the experience of just time and space and limited self concepts.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
When I was last um, watching a YouTube video, Rupert on YouTube, a couple of things, came to me about his teaching. I'm thinking of it because of what you were just saying about how being on retreat with him and the way he answers questions. Um, so Rupert locates himself. Because he knows himself as consciousness. Um, his What emanates from that consciousness is consciousness. So when he it is itself the consciousness that is answering the question. So the question has
Yeah.
an answer in words that make sense to the linear thinking part of the mind, but the answer to the question is contained in the reality of the consciousness that is the only reality that's present. And when two or more are gathered, when minds are truly joined, and even to say joined is a misnomer, because that implies that they at some point were not joined. So
Mhm.
when when we know the consciousness, when we know ourselves as our reality, the experience of receiving an answer from Rupert to a question is actually simply another excursion inside of consciousness.
Mhm.
It's almost like the answer isn't the point, although the answer is elegant and complete because of its source. When we read any documents, whether they're books or any documents that are written by mystics, those who are oriented to source, what we receive is source. And this chapter, the shared medium of mind, is an exposition. It's a a showing of what are the implications of the shared mind. What does that mean in terms of our actual moment to moment or day to day experience? How does that affect me if our minds are shared? And so this chapter is one of my favorites. I think every chapter I get to, it's my favorite, but this one for sure, because it's so practical.
Mhm. Yeah.
Um, and is it okay if I just talk about a couple of the things that I want to kind of put out there, and then you can.
Yeah, I'd love to hear what your favorite parts of the chapter are, or pages that you, or uh, phrases, anything that you want to share. Go ahead. It's funny that you did you get that when you said that where two or more are gathered is a quote that he uses in the very end of this chapter. He uses that quote that's in Matthew, where two or more are gathered, and he gives a different reflection on it that I really paid attention to when I read it, because I was familiar with the quote from Matthew,
Where is
and
it now?
it's in the
In the
it's in
last.
the it's in the very end of this chapter, where he talks about where two, or maybe it wasn't the last page, but it was towards the end. And it's on page 146, the top of page 146. He
Oh,
says that in the New Testament, the same understanding is expressed by St. Matthew, for when two or three are gathered in my name, there am I in the midst of them. In this gathering, the shared essence of each of our minds is magnified and shines as the experience of love. And I just love that. I've never heard it expressed or looked at in that way, because it's, if you're a Christian, the first thing you are taught, and you come to believe, is that where two or more are gathered in my name, well, me and you and Jesus is there with us, and it's much more than that. It's so much more than that, and the implications of it are what you just said, that it's a shared consciousness. And it's funny, it just sort of stuck when I read that, and then when you said it again, because when I read it, I was thinking about using that idea in San Francisco in my talk. I was thinking, oh, that would be cool to share that in my talk. So it sort of sat, and then when you said it again, I love how Rupert expresses it. He expresses it after he talks about another couple of things that I'm very familiar which is the use of the word satsang,
mhm.
and because I've been in many satsangs with Muji, and also he uses the term sangha. And I've also come to have many great friends and just beloved family in the Sangha in Portugal with Muji. So I love where Rupert brings these terms into a different way of seeing and a different way of experiencing the terms that are used. So thank you for that.
Oh, yeah, you're so welcome. And I guess I forgot that I read that. Forgot it was in there. Yeah, it just came out of my mouth. Um, and it actually, what you're describing is the way that Rupert gives us something that we already know, a phrase or an idea that, or something from the Bible that everyone knows, and presents it in a new way. I actually understand that to mean that a lot of the things that we think we know, we have been referring. When I say I know what a satsang is, I know what sangha is, the knowing that I'm referring to is the limited thinking, the part of the mind that wants to define and separate and say, I know that. Like
Yes.
I can claim that I've give me that, I know it.
Mm-hmm.
So what Rupert brings, because he's located as consciousness, because he's consistent and reliable as an emanation. We're all emanations of the divine. Many of us dance in and out of it. He's a consistent and reliable emanation. So when he shares definitions, he is representing the definitions from consciousness. He's presenting, what does two or more are gathered mean when you know yourself to be consciousness? Well, it means that, there's a sentence here that is just exquisitely beautiful. Now, this refers to sangha and satsang, which is community, or satsang meaning being, and sangha community. Rupert says sharing of being, the sharing of our being, is the vehicle of the dissolution of the self.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the experience that I have, both when I'm, listening to Rupert on video, or I'm in his presence, or I'm with my, teachers of God family, or I'm in the midst of others who are rooted in consciousness. My
Mm-hmm.
experience is that simply being together is the recipe, it's the formula for the dissolving of this sense of separation. And
Mm-hmm.
that the actual purpose of us gathering is so that we can have the experience of our reality. And so I also love the way Rupert teaches, using so many practical, tangible examples and things that he asks me, the reader, me, the viewer, to ask myself questions, to actually, as a scientist would, as a very curious person would, to look at the nature of my actual experience, and from that place answer the questions, not from the what I remember and what thought tells me and what my mother said, but to answer my experience. And if that's a powerful, irrefutable place to be coming from. You cannot argue with experience, with your actual experience. And that's also one of the themes in this chapter is, really moving into experience itself as the only reliable form of knowing. Like my access to knowing is either through my experience or it's not at all. If I think about consciousness, that is not what that will not bring me the bliss, the dissolution of the self the way it does if I actually have the experience of it.
Right. Yeah. And I don't know that I don't know that it's necessary. You could be right in this. I know the course talks about sharing all the time, and um, you'll you'll know the truth when you'll know the truth when you share it with another. And it seems to me that I don't have to be talking to anybody else to realize, to self realize awareness. I don't have to I don't need another person, another, because I, there's an entry point, a portal into the consciousness of the one consciousness that there is. You've entered in, and it doesn't require like a couple of people to enter into what you always are. And in that experience, I feel that you recognize awareness being aware of itself. And so I'm aware of everything. I'm aware of the of the experience of knowing what I am. And I don't know, it seems like that also knows that everything else is this too. And it but it does bring a reflection of what I am, comes back to me like a mirror when I share it with others. It's just, I don't know how to really describe it. It's almost, I don't know how it works, but that is how it works. When I share truth as a facilitator, a presenter, or if something comes in when I'm talking to another that is total truth, it really feels palpable to to impart that, and also to see through perceptions, or see beyond the perceptions of what the body's eyes are seeing, but to have an understanding inform me, even using the body's eyes, but wisdom comes in and informs me that this is also a reflection of this same place that I'm seeing from, is what is being seen as well.
Mm-hmm.
It is a shared experience. It is a shared, and it's also somehow it seems like it can be individual, even though it's not.
Right. Um, I'm not a scientist, but I know holograms, a holographic image is one in which each piece of the image is actually a miniature of the whole thing.
Sure.
And so, and I think Rupert has used that as an analogy as well. But um, when you're saying that, we don't need another person to have this direct experience or to know, to be aware of being aware, right? We don't need another body to be aware of being aware.
Right.
And that's just absolutely right. And the reason that's so is that each of these apparent separate selves, as Rupert says in this chapter, each of these appearances is simply one consciousness
Mm.
appearing as, objects and people and cars and all of this, all of it is just the one thing.
Yeah.
So, absolutely, we can know this without having to have any special anything. Um, and just as when somebody does mirror work, for instance, where you look in your own reflection and you tell yourself, I love you, just as in that practice or exercise tends to like stoke the fire of this vibration, this frequency that Rupert talks about, the vibration and frequency of consciousness.
Mhm.
When we're with someone who is, holding that vibration and frequency, we resonate easily with it. And
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, it's like having a fire going, and you just add your log to the fire. It's just makes it a bigger fire because that this other person's already got the thing going. So it's easy to join in and build the energy together. But I also find it easy to do that without anyone else. Um, but I enjoy tremendously Sangha. I enjoy community
Yeah.
enormously.
Yeah.
Um, and under what's underneath the enjoyment of my brothers and my sisters is our reality. Like the reason it isn't that this one loves people, because honestly, this one doesn't love people, right? This concept, this construct is afraid of people, judges people, hates people, wants them to go away, blah, blah, blah. This one does not like people. My reality doesn't know anything other than the joining. So anytime I do anything that's in the vibration and frequency of my reality, anything I do, whether it's telling myself I love myself in a mirror or thinking loving thoughts, patting my dog, walking in nature, Rupert's talking about all the ways consciousness shows up. It shows up as the feeling of love.
Mhm.
That's how consciousness is as a feeling. It shows up as the appreciation of beauty. That's how consciousness appears in terms of objects.
Mhm.
So there are lots of ways for me to, ignite or maintain that awareness, the being aware without having to be with another person. But I really, really, really love the experience of um, joining together in consciousness. There's just it rocks, man.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
it's also really exciting to receive that from others, to be in consciousness and know that that's what I'm swimming in with other people. It's an extraordinary, it is extraordinary, and it's evolutionary.
Mhm.
Um all the things that people have been marching for peace all this time in order to accomplish, consciousness has already done it. We
Yeah.
just, we're just figuring it out. So, um, there are a couple of things in here I'll just mention, and then I'll let the other people on the call talk, and I'll let you tell me how you want it to go. But so here, even on the first page of the chapter, he's talking about telepathy and intuition. So, if you believe in the matter only model, if one believed that they are a body, that this is what they are, and that there are objects out there that I can perceive and touch and stuff. If I'm believing that we're matter, it's very difficult to explain telepathy intuition, and synchronicities.
Yeah.
And when you come from that consciousness only model, it those are simply normal symptoms and signs of the oneness of the fact that there isn't more than one being. Even
Right.
me saying when two or more are gathered, that itself is consciousness. That I did not say that. I didn't write. I didn't even remember that was in there. It just that was consciousness. That's an example of consciousness
Yeah.
picking up, knowing itself, and saying, "Well, this is what needs to be said."
Hmm.
And just before I go into any more of the notes, I just want to say because this needs to come out of me. Um, I don't read Rupert Spira's thing, or I don't meditate or any of that because I think it's cool and I want to be cool. And I don't read Rupert Spira because I want to be smart and be able to talk about this stuff. The only reason I do any of this stuff is because I don't like suffering. Okay? That's the whole reason I do anything. I don't like suffering. It doesn't feel good. I gravitate toward anything that feels good, not stupid good, not like drugs, like really in line with my reality. That's the purpose for me of being here with you. It's because we all are attracted to our truth and our reality. And I just want to say that it, knowing how to put those non-dual words together and all that is irrelevant. If I know that I know, it no words are needed.
Yeah.
The words go out the window. But the words are what I do need in order to help me to understand what I need to let go of, what's going on. So they're sort of the ladder that helps me to get where I'm going. And then I kick the ladder. I don't need the ladder anymore.
Hmm.
I want to have that direct experience as much as possible. I'm not saying I don't need Rupert and I don't need people, but you know what I mean. I
Hmm.
don't, it isn't the book that is making the difference. It's consciousness in which the book appears, in which this one appears. It's consciousness that has an infinite curiosity that is never satisfied. It's always growing, it's always evolving, it's always
Yes.
expanding. So, if you're feeling drawn to this, and one of the things I love about Rupert is that he almost never speaks to the negative. He's always saying things like, only do what you really, really, really have in your heart to do. Like, do not focus on consciousness and awareness because you're trying to like solve a problem or get out of something or because you think you're supposed to. He's like, don't go toward awareness because you think you're supposed to. Only do it if it's the most exciting thing you can think of right now. And if
Hmm.
there's something else that's more exciting, go do that. And
Hmm.
why would a teacher say that? Well, because it doesn't matter if you get it by skiing or you get it by gardening or you get it by reading Rupert Spira or you get it by skydiving. The consciousness is the consciousness. So Rupert's like, if you pursue the vibration and frequency of wholeness and love and beauty, you're going to get the experience that you're looking for. Don't try to use the ego that wants to tell you, you have to do it 20 minutes a day or you're not good enough. You'll never have the experience because
Hmm.
the experience is infinite. It doesn't care if you spent 20 minutes or 2 hours or 20 hours. It doesn't compute with that.
Yeah.
Um,
I totally agree with that, and I also feel that for me, it's the it's the experience of practicing the just being, and
Mm.
not even a practicing. It's a preferring, because it does
Mm.
it does it does give me peace. It
Mhm.
does take me to a place that is very familiar, and that it's touching on the garment of the eternal, and there that's very compelling. Once the light of that experience begins to come in, you just want more of it. You just want more, and you want more because you have touched on creation. You have touched
Mhm.
on the identification of what you are, and you want more of that. That's what makes us like needy as an ego mind, but we don't really know what it is. We think we want more of this and more of that. It makes us a sort of a getting mechanism, because creation wants wants to wants to bask in itself, and that's the experience that you're describing, is just basking in the self, because it feels so damn good and there's no suffering there.
Yes.
Well
Oh,
said. Well said, sister, and thank you for sharing from that part of what all of this really means. And the reason that all of us do this is because we can't not do it. We're drawn to it like a magnet, or we're drawn to it like the like a like
a moth
a
to the
moth
flame.
to the flame. Yes, we are, because the self, this limited self, has to dissolve into the experience of this truth. It's beautiful.
Yes. Yes, yes,
So
yes.
I want to go to the chat board for just a minute and just see what comments we have. We have a lot of happy, hello, happy now, and we have some comments. David says, our consciousness is shared, not our minds or our perceptions. And Andrea says, you just shared what this chapter is saying. When you were talking a minute ago, you were talking about Sangha, and you were talking about the community and the sharing of this consciousness. And Catherine says, oh, Annika says, knowing is the same as what I am. This knowing and being are one. You know,
Mm.
I, I just love hearing people reflecting back the truth back to me, to us. And I think that's the other thing that I love about Rupert's writing, is that it resonates at a yes. It resonates
Mhm.
just like when you read something on the board here. It resonates yes. And Annika says, yes, we are the very I am, no matter the circumstance, just what you said. But being aware of it can be enhanced through a gathering, yes, or sharing, as if it is acknowledged. That's so true. The gathering sort of builds a bonfire in the light of truth. It builds a bonfire that's almost uncontainable. When we go into one of these gatherings, like a Rupert gathering, when I go to a Muji, a satsang, or if I go to when we go to the conference in San Francisco, or a
Mhm.
Byron Katie event, it's like it's you get so caught up in the flame that you're almost on fire. You're just internally on fire for the truth of what's being expressed. And that happens in all of these kinds of gatherings.
Mhm. Yes, it's I'm so excited about going to the San Francisco thing because I know how I'm going to feel being with all these people who are interested in the same thing. Just this morning, I was having a conversation with someone about how the world will change, how to change the world. And he was saying, there aren't enough people yet to shift the consciousness. And I was just sharing with him that it isn't, you don't need a majority, because there is just consciousness. And my hope, I have enormous hope. The reason I have the hope, and this is what I was sharing with him, he's not a student of non-duality, but I think, because it's our reality, everybody knows this inside. Even if they don't think they know it, they know it. So I was just telling him that the reason that we can all have enormous hope is that as consciousness, which is, what it's the only thing going on here is consciousness. Look at what consciousness is. Oh, look at how it's moving. Look at the direction it's going. Look at what it's opening and revealing. It would make absolutely no sense whatsoever for consciousness to be doing what it's doing, which is having this extraordinary experience that opens itself up to itself to blossom and bloom in
Yes.
these unbelievable ways. If this were for nothing, I just can't. It doesn't compute. And I know that, like the last part of this chapter, which, I have to totally give Rupert so many props for keeping this real. Like, what I love about him is he's not in a cave somewhere talking about stuff that's not related to your actual experience, because that wouldn't be nearly as helpful as what he's saying. So on the very last page, he says, in that first paragraph on page 150, for centuries, our culture has been dominated by the materialist view of reality. It's not necessary to point out the devastating effects of this view, meaning the materialistic view.
Mm-hmm.
The extent of suffering and conflict in society speaks for itself. And then he says, if the human race still exists in 500 years' time,
Mm-hmm.
he said, if the human race still exists in 500 years' time, hopefully people will look back on this period of materialism just as we now look back on the theories that the earth was flat or the geocentric universe. And if humanity doesn't exist in 500 years, it will most likely be because materialism prevailed.
Mm.
And as I was talking to this person, they, were saying, well, there are not enough people. And I said, look, consciousness doesn't require a majority. It doesn't work that way. It's only one. So every one of us, every aspect of consciousness that is knowing itself as consciousness is shifting consciousness for everybody. So we don't need like a legion of people. We need people who are locating themselves consistently, as I call Rupert, a reliable and consistent host. I want to be a reliable and consistent consciousness channel, vehicle. And to me, that is why this is a meaningful and important activity to do.
Mm-hmm.
Just the way you're doing it, it's important because if I really want to save the world, I must allow consciousness to take this experience called this one and do with it as consciousness wants to do, and get out of the way and not put my story in place of what consciousness wants to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I thought that was a pretty. I'm getting feedback. I'm getting I was hearing an echo. It's gone now. I thought that when I read that statement, that I thought, if that you just read, if humanity does not still exist in 500 years' time, it will most likely be because materialism prevailed. I think that's a an alarming, kind of an alarming statement, except for what you just said is what I also agree with, that consciousness is waking up to itself. And this is the great awakening around the world. There's just too many signs of it changing like a forest fire. It's taking over the, and you can see it. I I the internet has really enhanced it and really propelled it
Yes.
to when I first when I was a fundamentalist Christian, I wouldn't have looked outside to I wouldn't have looked, to gone to the bookstore or the library and looked up consciousness ideas. I went on the internet and I'm looking up stuff, and I'm seeing stuff come on my computer that's piquing my interest. I'm going, what is that? Feelings buried alive never die. Or and what is that about the what's a Hasidic Jew and what's this and what's that? And it's all of this information is coming to me in my home, just right there on the screen. And this
Mhm.
is happening like wildfire around the world. And that's why so many people, we have 25,000 people on our mailing list, and they're from all the countries in the world, including China, where you would never even have contact with people. So this consciousness is
Mhm.
waking up at a very rapid pace, and I just don't think that there's a possibility that materialism will prevail. It has dominated for all of these millennia, and for all of these many years. Now's the time for consciousness to realize itself in a very profound great awakening, and that's why we're seeing it. That's my perception on it anyway.
Yes, I share that perception. And one other kind of download that I got, and this is it can't be proven or anything like that, but um, I was probably reading something of Rupert's or watching him, and then I've also been reading Ramana Maharshi. I have a couple of books from Ramana Maharshi, so I kind of read them both because Ramana Maharshi is located as consciousness. So when I interact with Ramana Maharshi's energy through his words, it is a portal. And what I realized is that when Ramana Maharshi was doing what he was doing, as you said, Bill, there was no internet. There wasn't there. You couldn't, disseminate this information. And I really feel as if because and I'm speaking from consciousness, and I'm speaking of consciousness from consciousness. So when you look at Rupert and then Ramana Maharshi, you realize that consciousness evolved an internet, took the Ramana Maharshi message, and is now able to disseminate that message to itself in a very powerful and efficient way. And
Mhm.
what Rupert's doing so well is using the power of the internet to allow the message to do what it never could do in Ramana Maharshi's day. Not to mention the fact that Ramana Maharshi was kind of not kind of, he was a recluse. He was not interested in running around the countryside. Um, and as we all know, Rupert was a recluse for 30 years. And I just see this enormous synergy between the two of them. I really feel like when I see Rupert, if I had a cup right here, Ramana Maharshi took everything that he was and he poured it into this cup called Rupert Spira. And now this is the most um, accessible way to receive that teaching because Ramana Maharshi just poured all of his teaching into this new container.
Mhm.
That's how I kind of look at what Rupert's doing.
Yeah.
He's just, and even the way he, some of Ramana Maharshi always said, say to yourself, who am I? And
Mhm.
Rupert's like, that inquiry through who am I is, it's not as sharp and clear. It allows too much, it doesn't cut through what obscures reality.
Mm-hmm.
The question that can't be messed with is, am I aware? That
Yes.
question can't be, confused, and you can't go off on some tangent when you're asking, am I aware? So even just the fact that Rupert is taking Ramana Maharshi's words and then bringing them to just another level,
Mm-hmm.
there's just a profound relationship. And of course, it's only consciousness
Mm-hmm.
evolving right in our midst.
Mm-hmm.
As Rupert says, it's God staring itself in the face. That's
Mm-hmm.
what he says.
Right. Well, and Rupert is also bringing many other. I mean, that glass is getting filled with many other teachers of 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 wisdom teaching, and and consciousness itself is filling that cup that is now
Correct.
being expressed and poured out in a way that is understandable. It's not it's not like the Zohar or the pre Bhagavad Gita, or the teaching that was like, what is this thing? Rupert
Right.
is expressing in such an easily understood vernacular that it's just you can drink it in at all levels of your uh, intelligence and understanding. So I just love that, and thank you for sharing that connection with Ramana as you did. And one of the things I love about how Rupert points us to the experience of the truth is, and sometimes we muck it up with saying the wrong words the wrong way. And if you watch Rupert in all of these chapters, he'll say something, and then he'll say, and not really that, but not even that even. And so he'll self correct because you're trying to use words to say something that doesn't really even work itself. But I love how Rupert brings you, at least for me, I love how he talks about relaxing into the
Mm.
discovery of awareness, or relaxing. It's where the finite relaxes as we go to sleep at night. It relaxes, and more of the infinite self is able to emerge in that space. And that's I just he just makes it so that you can make contact with it, and you can have the living and breathing experience of it at the same time.
Hmm. That is probably the other major theme I got from this chapter, was what you were saying about relaxing, because the relaxing that Rupert talks about a couple of times has to do with the relaxing of, even when we were on the same retreat together. But Rupert often says that attention focuses and narrows. So he uses lots of examples in here. The way that our waking state is simply a narrowing of awareness. Awareness is ubiquitous. Awareness is everything.
Hmm.
Attention in the waking state is a voluntary. It's consciousness voluntarily cutting itself down into this smallness, this
Yes.
thing, this little space. And when we would like to access awareness, or even access a greater degree of information simply on the level of being a body and a brain, the way to access that isn't to bear down and constrict and force, but to withdraw that, really intense attention, let that start to relax. And as we relax, our awareness is allowed to expand again, to include more aspects of the experience. Awareness is having all of the experience. My attention is what takes the allness and cuts it down to this little space. Where did I put my car keys? Right? I mean, I have 3 kids, so we spent a lot of time looking for things because, it's just how it goes. But what I often advise is, let's sit down for a second. Let's go and just have a cup of tea. Let's relax for a minute. And I'm not even going to talk about the keys or whatever it is. And then in a little while, we can start just having a conversation about, like, what did you do today? How did you come home? And as we relax, our consciousness expands, and suddenly, like, oh, that's right. I told so and so I would give them a ride home, and when they got out of the car, I put the key, whatever the story is.
Yeah.
We suddenly start to open to what's there, but it's not available if I try harder. It's just, the harder I try, it's like trying to hold on to a bar of soap. It squirts out of my hand.
Mm-hmm.
So this awareness, I think of it like an animal in the wild. I can't run up to it and, can I pat you? Can I, if you run up to a wild animal, it leaves. You have to just sit there. You have to calm down, and you have to let it show up. And that's what I love, the relaxing into the understanding.
Yeah. Yeah. What is your favorite? Do you have a favorite aha from this chapter before we close that you would like to share?
Okay, yes. And he doesn't say the thing about the rope and the snake in this chapter, but there was a paragraph at the end of the chapter. It's on page 150 again. And he says, the science of consciousness is consciousness's knowledge of itself. So that is far out, like just that sentence. The science of consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
All the science of consciousness is the knowing that consciousness has of itself.
Mm-hmm.
So consciousness's knowledge of itself, which is the only knowledge that remains the same, it's the only thing that never changes. In fact, Rupert telling me that, way back when, was the first time I understood how in other wisdom traditions, they could tell me that I'm eternal and infinite. Because I always used to walk around like, what part of me is eternal and infinite? I don't see eternal and infinite. When I connected with Rupert, and he kept saying, there is only one aspect of you that's never changed. And that's when everything kind of lined up. And I was like, oh, that is my eternal, infinite nature. But I didn't see it until he helped me to see it.
Yeah.
And then he said, so it's the same in all circumstances, under all conditions. Therefore, absolute knowledge or truth must be the foundation and the fountain of all the relative knowledge. And so that, to me, is where we are right now as human beings. We are finding out that snake is a rope, but we have to be willing to go to where we think the snake is. We can't stand over there and just talk about it. We have to go to where the snake is to really see that it's a rope. It's not what we thought it was, and that what our eternal and essential nature is. I can't determine what my nature is standing over there pointing to it. I have to actually know it. I have to have the direct experience of it. So that's like my takeaway, is that anything in my life that I'm thinking of, it's a snake. Anything that's scaring me, anything that I'm upset about, I have to and I sit that until I see it for what it really is.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Good one. Well, that was a good statement to close on, and I love this chapter, and Rupert has expressed some really amazing content in this chapter. And one of them that I loved that it was just, I'm going to quote Rupert at the conference this weekend. I'm going to put one quote up
Yay.
from Rupert that I just loved from this work. It's because the theme of this conference is love makes no exceptions. And
Mm,
love is incapable of making exceptions. And Rupert has a quote here I'm going to share with the conference. Love is the experience of our shared reality.
mhm,
Love is the experience. It's so my question, because I like investigation and self inquiry, love makes no exceptions. Is it true? Do you
mm,
absolutely know for certain that it's true?
mm,
I'm going to bring people into the into a gathering where we're going to prove that love not only is true, but we're going to have a direct experience with that question. So thank you all for joining with us.
Thank
And
you, Bill.
thank you. I appreciate it, Kimberly. And I'll see you in San Francisco in a couple of days. And you guys, I will be back on Tuesday next week. So we'll be doing this again with Annika next week. She's going to share with us on chapter 16, which is the memory of our eternity, and it's going to be great. I'm looking forward to that chapter as well, and I'll see you guys next week. Thank you for joining with us. Henrik, if you would email me, billfree at gmail, billfreeonline at gmail.com, I'll send you a link to the playlist, and then you can have it for your downloading into MP3s. I saw that note going through, and I'll see you guys next week. I love you all, and I'll see you in San Francisco, Kimberly. Bye-bye.
Love you. Bye.
Bye bye. Namaste,
Bye.
everyone.
Yeah, you